Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Steel episode number 175 based on novel. So let's start. Long Hao-chen, Kia, Wang Yuan. Do you three want to keep undergoing the round-robin tournament? Chen Zidian asked solemnly. As if everyone had predicted this outcome, the three of them replied simultaneously, keep going on. Two choices were possible at this point. One was to terminate the tournament while the other was to keep going on. Every winning match would then reward an extra 10 points for a total of 3 matches. Should someone defeat the other two, that would rank him or her number 1, thus earning yet another 20 points. These extra rounds were still part of the 7th round of the tournament. In other words, the final champion could almost double his 64 total earned points. Long Hao-chen declared in a clear voice, reporting to referee, Wang Yuan and I are conceding. Kia looked at Long Hao-chen in shock. He was Bright Glimmer of Hope's Subtitles, so this individual competition's champion should rather be him. Long Hao-chen smiled to her. At the time of the Demon Hunter selection, you conceded in the competition for my sake, for me to finally hurt you. I am now giving this championship back to you. Moreover, in my heart, you are the one I will never be able to defeat. Kia gave him a warm gaze. Idiot, in my eyes, this is all unimportant. But it is important to me. I don't want you to have any memories of feeling wronged. We will have many more challenges to face, where I will be giving my all to protect you. No one objected to Long Hao-chen and Wang Yuan's surrenders. This was within the rules, and was something that could only happen in the case of the 3 top seats being taken by a single temple. But actually, even the strongest Knight Temple had never achieved that in the past 500 years. Having won these 2 matches, Kia earned an extra 20 points and became champion, thus bringing in another 20 points in addition to the 64 total points for the 7th round. That way, another 96 points was added to Bright Glimmer of Hope's point total. And now, after this first stage terminated, Bright Glimmer of Hope had an astonishing 352 total points. Thus the first out of the 4 stages of the Temple's Great Gathering, the individual stage, came to an end. The final winner was the Demon Hunt Squad Bright Glimmer of Hope. At that very moment, the powerhouses from the 6 great temples were all unconsciously standing up, clapping for Bright Glimmer of Hope. Even the legendary figures Chen Zidian and Yang Haoyu did so. The initially mysterious Demon Hunt Squad became the eventual champions. Perhaps luck was a part of the process, but they had mostly relied on their own strengths. Just look at these youngsters. They were all below 30 years old, with the youngest of them around 25. But such a Demon Hunt Squad was already standing at the peak of humankind. Hope was emanating continuously from them. Nightfall. After returning from the celebrations that took place in the Alliance's headquarters, Bright Glimmer of Hope's members returned to cultivate in their own rooms. After all, the Temple's Great Gathering had just gotten started, and although they were holding a large lead already, the rest of the competition also had its shares of opportunities. The Temple's Great Gathering went at a very fast pace. The next day came the contest for the highest spiritual energy. The highest 3 in this aspect were undoubtedly their 3 gods' chosen ones, Long Hao-chen, Kia, and Chen Yinga. But they did not hold much of an advantage in total spiritual energy. After all, their age was an important factor to take into account. According to the rules, every year of age below 100 years old was to be accounted for 1,000 spiritual energy, and every year of age above that was to subtract 1,000 spiritual energy. The 3 of them had their spiritual energy totals above 200,000, since they were all domain wielders. Thus, although their spiritual energy totals did not really stand out in the scale of the Alliance, they still held a good competitiveness. As the others went back to cultivate in their own chambers, Lin Xin entered a room on his own, stealthily making his way into the Mage Temple's side. Naturally, the Mage Temple's guards recognized him, in his identity as the grandson of an auxiliary head, in addition to his originally high position in the temple. Of course, no one stopped him. On the highest floor of the Mage Temple's inner quarters, Lin Xin stopped in front of a certain room, knocking on the door after hesitating for a bit. Come in. Lin Chen's aged voice came out from the room. Lin Xin pulled the door open and entered. Lin Chen's office was very large, covering an area close to 200 square meters. There were leather sofas for guests, bookcases lined 2 walls, and to the side, a huge ancient wooden desk. Lin Chen was seated behind his desk, a book on magic in his hands. Grandpa. Lin Xin bowed to Lin Chen before joining his side. Lin Chen closed the book in his hands, lifting his head to glance at his grandson. You shouldn't have come. Your Bright Glimmer of Hope having achieved such results, your return to our mage temple would very likely cause complaints. Your comrades wouldn't be happy over that. Lin Xin chuckled. Let them complain, so what? As for my comrades, they won't suspect me. I am honorably visiting my grandfather. So what about that? Lin Chen laughed. You brat, stop giving me this bullshit. You still remember about your grandfather? Tell me, what have you come to me for? Li Xin let out a laugh, but did not immediately speak, still having some hesitation on his face. So? You're not like yourself. If you have something to say, say it. Hearing his grandfather's manner of speech, as if building his resolve, Lin Xin firmly declared, Grandpa, I want to learn Saint Sun Curse from you. What? Lin Chen was in great shock, standing abruptly, unaware his chair falling down to the ground. Giving a blank look to his grandson, Lin Chen's aged face seemed to twitch due to excitement. You? Are you for real? Lin Xin nodded vigorously. Grandpa, I want to learn Saint Sun Curse from you. Although it caused the loss of father and mother back then, the spell itself is not to be blamed. More importantly, I need this power. As my comrades are getting stronger and stronger, I also need to strengthen my own training as well, so that I don't drop behind and can follow them in the conflict against demonkind. So please, pass Saint Sun Curse on to me. I will be certain to carry forward this secret technique, and research it as the base of my own domain. Lin Chen looked at Lin Xin, remaining silent for several seconds. On this day of great discouragement, he absolutely didn't expect his grandson to actually bring him such a pleasant surprise. Although Lin Chen had broken through the 9th step already, his heart was like dead due to Lin Xin's disappearance. These 5 short years felt as long as 10 years to him. Lin Xin's final safe return was like a spark of life pouring back into him. He no longer had any hope other than for his grandson to come back alive. And in the rest of the temple's great gathering, Lin Xin gave him even greater surprises. On this day, after only a few short years, Lin Xin's cultivation had actually already broken through the 9th step, and was already no inferior to his own. The Heart of Fire was really far stronger than before, and he had actually even made it to the top 6 of the competition. Such achievements reassured Lin Chen greatly. He may be taking part as a part of bright glimmer of hope, but so what about it? In Lin Chen's eyes, Lin Xin had already been walking on a path of his own. His grandson being already so powerful, he had no will to importune Lin Xin. After all, Saint Sun Curse had been an immense burden in Lin Xin's heart. For him to now be willing to learn offensive magic was already huge progress. At that very moment, Lin Xin was standing in front of him, unexpectedly asking him about learning Saint Sun Curse to inherit a generation of Lin Chen's efforts. How could that not excite him greatly? No, that was already beyond the description of the word excitement. This grandfather was simply on the verge of collapse from bliss. Lin Xin supported his dazed grandfather's body, giving off a laugh. Don't get excited. If something bad happens to you, who will be there to teach me Saint Sun Curse? Just look, I will definitely make your creation a mass destruction weapon in the future, to scare all demonkind witless as the Dark Era will come to an end. Grandpa, please live well until that day comes. Lin Chen's body shook slightly as he nodded consecutively. All right, all right. I will be sure to wait for this day, for sure. Come, I am bringing you to the experimental field to teach you Saint Sun Curse. Although it was already nighttime, Lin Chen's excitement had affected him a bit too, as the grandson was also pulled outwards. Lin Xin was not part of tomorrow's competition, so he naturally had no qualms staying up all night. Grandfather and grandson excitedly left the room and proceeded for the magic experiment room. A short time after they were gone, another nearby door opened close to Lin Chen's office. Li Xingji came out from within, looking towards their departure route, appearing in great ponder. Who knew what he was thinking? The temple's great gathering's individual competition was over, but the masses in Holy City were not the least relaxed, but instead even more excited. The competition kept going, and today the priest temple was also part of the festivities. The total ranking was bound to change accordingly. After the priest temple underwent their first round of spiritual energy assessment, it brought them a final total of 60 points, a result close to all the previous sessions. Today, every temple would send their strongest 3 people for spiritual energy assessment. A huge crystal pillar was erected on the center of the field on the previous evening, specialized for spiritual energy measuring. Right now, the 6 great temples had all already dispatched 3 of their people, and Bright Glimmer of Hope was no exception. Because of the previous individual competition, the spiritual energy levels were understood to some extent from the mutual encounters. So this spiritual energy stage did not hold too much suspense. As the champions of the individual competition, Bright Glimmer of Hope's Demon Hunt squad would be the last one to appear. This was one of the benefits they had gained. Like the individual competition, the spiritual energy contest did not allow the use of any equipment or boosting pills. Everyone was to rely on their individual strength. A total of 21 individuals already formed a circle around the crystal pillar. As the chief referee, Chen Zidian was standing the closest to the crystal pillar's side. Everyone would need to go through his inspection first, so cheating was completely impossible as long as the one on watch was him. Chen Zidian indicated to the Warrior Temple's head Chiu Yonghao, based on the ranking of the first round, the spiritual energy measuring will be taking place in the reverse order of the first competition's ranking. The Warrior Temple shall go first. Chiu Yonghao nodded and stepped forward to get measured alongside two powerhouses of the Warrior Temple. In terms of overall strength, the Warrior Temple was the weakest of the 6 temples. But they had the greatest population amongst the 6 great temples. After all, the standards for becoming a warrior were pretty low. Chiu Yonghao was the first to step forward, lifting his right hand and placing it on the crystal pillar. Immediately, the transparent crystal changed into another color. A red color rose from the bottom of the crystal pillar, slowly going up to reach a height of about 33 meters, at around 1/10 of the pillar. Then it turned orange in color and kept rising up to gain another 33 meters and turned yellow. The colors within the crystal pillar started to slow down as they ascended, and Chiu Yonghao's look became extremely heavy, his forehead dripping with sweat. From the distinction of colors, red corresponded to 100,000 spiritual energy, orange to another 100,000 spiritual energy. The fact that he had reached the yellow area signified that Chiu Yonghao's spiritual energy had already surpassed 200,000. His age having already crossed 100 years old, he could only rely on his own strength for this trial. Finally, the color within the crystal pillar stopped rising after a bit over a half of the yellow area, then Chiu Yonghao's bar stopped going up. Letting out a light sigh, Chiu Yonghao finally relaxed as an immense golden number arose, floating atop the crystal pillar. 271,364. This was Chiu Yonghao's total spiritual energy. The other 2 powerhouses of the Warrior Temple came next. Their cultivation levels were still quite a bit behind Chiu Yonghao, and they were not yet domain-wielding powerhouses. The 2 of them were about the 200,000 mark. Finally, with the addition of the age bonuses, the Warrior Temple reached a total of 694,160 points. These results were a bit underwhelming. After the Warrior Temple came the Assassin Temple. Their situation being a bit better off, their spiritual energy totals reached 783,200, which could be considered not bad. The Spiritual Temple, having obtained a total of 58 points, was a bit below the 60 or so of the Priest Temple, making them the third party to go. Thanks to the strong display of their head Chen Hongyu, they had a final spiritual energy total reaching 832,241, far above the previous 2 temples. The Priest Temple was truly a bit lucky in their first stage of the trials, and did not hold much of a dominance in this second stage. In the end, their spiritual energy total barely reached above 800,000, but was quite below the Spiritual Temple. So far, for temples rankings was settled. Now only the Mage Temple, Knight Temple, and Demon Hunt Squad Bright Glimmer of Hope had yet to go. All knew that the true chance of achieving victory had come. No one was optimistic about Bright Glimmer of Hope in the spiritual energy count rankings. Although they had the advantage of their age, there was no way their total strength would add up to 900,000 or more, so the only question left was who of the Mage Temple or the Knight Temple would be placed above the other. The Mage Temple had Li Xingxi, Mo Wo, and that mage with the greatest defense who controlled an Earth Elemental domain. The Darkness Mage, Mo Wu, and the Earth Mage were both close to 300,000. Add to this that they were below 100 years old of age, and they gained some bonuses. The Mage Temple already reached close to 610,000 after the 2 of them passed. Li Xingxi was the last one to set out. Within the crystal pillar rose several colors. Red, orange, yellow, green, and it finally entered a blue area. Although a lot of people had guesses about Li Xingxi's cultivation level, they still could not help but cry out in alarm. This meant that his internal spiritual energy was already above 400,000. Finally, the pillar stopped in the blue area. Li Xingxi's spiritual energy was over 420,000, and adding to that the scores of the other 2 mags, the Mage Temple had surpassed 1,000,000, reaching 1,007,423. Could the Knight Temple surpass the Mage Temple? The Knight Temple very rapidly gave them a strong response. The Knight Temple's 3 did not include the Divine Knight, Long Qianyu, but were under Yang Haoyu's lead, with that ultimate shield of the Knight Temple, and the one who made it to the top 6. As the three knights stood, Li Xingqi's complexion immediately became a far more unsightly sight to behold. The ultimate shield was the first to go up, his spiritual energy set just above 320,600. The knight who made it to the top 6 was the second one to go, his spiritual energy fixed beyond 332,800. Finally came Yang Haoyu's turn. He calmly approached the crystal pillar, lifting his right hand to touch it lightly. A shocking scene surfaced. The pillar's colors surged out at once, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, then finally entered a turquoise area. Number 1 of the Temple Alliance. That was absolutely not just a simple name. Yang Haoyu protected the Night Temple's honor with his strength, his internal spiritual energy reaching past 568,000 to exceed Li Xingqi's 420,000 by a large margin. In the end, the Night Temple surpassed the Mage Temple's total points by 120,000. After this stage, the two temples' rankings was bound to change. Bright Glimmer of Hope was the last one to go. Chen Yinga, whose internal spiritual energy reached 170,000, was the first one to go. Kia, whose internal spiritual energy reached 190,000, was the next one to go. At this point, a lot of people were secretly sighing inwardly. This demon hunt squad Bright Glimmer of Hope was, after all, still young. They truly couldn't establish any dominance in this spiritual energy contest. Finally came Long Haochen's turn. He was the only bright spot Bright Glimmer of Hope had, thanks to the Heart of Eternity. His internal spiritual energy broke through 300,000, before finishing above 310,000. Thanks to these few days' matches and comprehensions, Long Haochen's cultivation had progressed to some extent. If the Heart of Eternity's extra 90,000 was not counted, his internal spiritual energy would be reaching about 220,000. In the end, the results of the three totaled over 570,000. This time, the superiority of the age bonus became the spotlight. Long Haochen was 25 years old, Kia 24, and Chen Yinga 28. This added over 233,000 to their spiritual energy total. This gave them a final amount of over 800,000. Funnily enough, maybe due to an affinity with the god of luck, although their total of spiritual energy was below the spiritual temple, it still surpassed the priest temple, and by just 13 points no less. Finally, the Night Temple was the uncontroversial number 1 in the contest of the highest spiritual energy, followed by the Mage Temple, the Spiritual Temple, Bright Glimmer of Hope, the Priest Temple, Assassin Temple, and Warrior Temple. After this stage terminated, a variation happened to the rankings. On the basis of the rules, the number 1 gained 200 points, the number 2 gained 150, the number 3 gained 120, the number 4 gained 90, the number 5 gained 60, and the last one had none. Because of the addition of Bright Glimmer of Hope, the 6 sides became 7, and thus the number 6 would gain 30 points, and the last one none. So, the ranking was as follows: Bright Glimmer of Hope for 42, Night Temple 280, Mage Temple 255, Spiritual Temple 178, Priest Temple 120, Assassin Temple 64. Although Bright Glimmer of Hope was only number 4 of this stage, because of their overwhelming advantage from the first stage, they still had a large lead. While the Night Temple overtook the Mage Temple, the Warrior Temple remained the most miserable. Although the previous 2 rounds of competition were quite frantic, the true rankings would only be determined on tomorrow's meeting. That's because the third round of competition, Domain Contest, was the most valuable one in terms of points. Based on the rules, the number 1 would earn over 500 points. And furthermore, now that this was not a 6-sided contest due to the addition of the 7th party Bright Glimmer of Hope, those numbers would very possibly end up higher to some extent. These matches would very possibly include some turns of events. After all, Long Haochen's group only had approximately a 150% advantage compared to the Night Temple. So at the end of today's competition, Long Haochen's hurriedly brought his comrades back to the Alliance's headquarters. Lin Xin hasn't returned yet? Long Haochen asked Sima Xian. Sima Xian shook his head, not yet. He told me last evening that he would look for his grandfather to study magic, and has not given any news since then. Long Haochen nodded lightly, faintly able to guess what Lin Xin was wanting to study. Because there was no need for him in the second and third stages, Lin Xin's absence had no influence on the flow of the competition. Captain, let me go up tomorrow. Wang Yuan proposed determinedly. Chen Yinga immediately asked anxiously, Yuan, you can't be planning to fight over it with me. This third stage permits the use of equipment, so with my spiritual saint robe, I will definitely not suffer a loss. In the third domain competition, each party was to send 3 people, all of whom must be domain-wielding powerhouses. Bright Glimmer of Hope had 4 of these, amongst whom Long Houchen and Caio would certainly be sent. So, the third seat was naturally to be picked amongst Wang Yuanyuan and Chen Yinga. These 2 girls ordinarily got along extremely well, but they couldn't help but have a dispute right now. Long Houchen laughed and remarked, "Don't argue. Let me make an analysis, this way you should both agree on who we should send." The first and second stages of the competition were both for evaluating individual strength. And that's just one's pure strength, without accounting for any equipment. That was the pure strength evaluation of the temple's great gathering. The later stages are for evaluating strength as a whole. So equipment are allowed in the last 2 stages, which thus reflects the level of the 6 great temples' resources as well. The greatest contenders are still the Mage Temple and Knight Temple. In the third domain battle, we have only one goal, and that is to become the final champions. Because of Long Houchen's declaration, everyone had queer feelings, because they were actually not so confident in their own strength. A domain stems from one's strength, so even if they had a few divine tools at their disposal, what assurance could they have in front of the 6 great temples' countless years of accumulated resources? Long Houchen continued, the final stage is a team battle tournament. Although we are mostly pretty okay in terms of equipment, that is not the case for everyone. In particular, Wen Zhao, Duan Yi, and Brother Zhong's equipment are rather lacking. So we should rely on the synergies between all our vocations in the team battle, although I don't have an absolute confidence in being able to achieve victory. But, the domain battle is the most richly rewarded one. We should not give up on this one. The domain battle is a pure contest of domains, as well as a display of matching domains. The first requirement is that the confronting domains are not allowed to clash with each other, but should complement each other. Relatively speaking, my light attribute and Kia domain of purification are pretty synergistic. But Yuanyuan's blood domain and Kia's domain of purification conflict to some extent. Although Yinga's beast god domain cannot produce synergistic combinations with ours, at least it won't conflict. Adding to that the Saint spiritual robes boost, she's the most suitable to join us in battle. After Long Houchen's explanation, Wang Yuanyuan was immediately disappointed, while Chen Yinga smiled at her. Han Yu said, "Boss, since tomorrow's domain battle is so important, shouldn't we train for it?" Long Houchen shook his head, "There's no need. Don't worry, I am really confident. As for where this confidence stems from, let me keep the suspense for now. You will come to understand tomorrow." Reaching this point, he revealed a mysterious smile. It was not that he did not want to disclose it, but if this secret were to leak, some changes would surely appear in his comrades' expressions. Although that method could not be called cheating, not letting it be known by too many was the best. The next morning, when they proceeded for the Alliance's great stadium, Lin Xin still had yet to get back. Long Houchen did not send another to look for him. Although Lin Xin had an emotional disposition, he was still reliable. He believed that he would definitely be back for the team competition tomorrow. After a few days of reparation, all the magic projectors in the Alliance's great stadium were back to its best state. The distance between the Alliance's headquarters and the Alliance's great stadium was close. Going through a passage in the warrior's entrance, the powerhouses from the 6 great temples and Bright Glimmer of Hope proceeded towards the stadium. The area outside the walls had long since filled with people. At the sight of Long Houchen's group, cheers immediately came from them. Bright Glimmer of Hope, Bright Glimmer of Hope. The masses were not in chaos, although they were many, their shouts were uniform, and the fanatical looks on their faces and their cheers were more enthusiastic than any competing powerhouses. These days, the Night Temple intentionally propagated the news of the accomplishments of the Demon Hunt Squad Bright Glimmer of Hope to the whole holy city as well as every city and village in the Temple Alliance. Their records of killing demon gods, their interventions in the Holy War, and more importantly, that they were the first Demon Hunt Squad to have destroyed demon god pillars. 2 demon god pillars had already been destroyed, smashed by their hands. Even the humans that were the least informed on demons knew that the 72 demon god pillars were their root. The Dark Era had already been ongoing for over 6,000 years, all the while a demon god pillar had never gotten destroyed. What meant the news that Bright Glimmer of Hope had destroyed 2 of them? It meant hope. Feeling the cheers of the masses, every member constituting Bright Glimmer of Hope were full of fervor. For the sake of the Alliance, for the sake of leading all humankind on the way out of darkness, they must fight courageously, and make themselves even more powerful. After treading into the Alliance's great stadium, Long Houchen nodded to the others before making his way alongside Kia and Chen Yinga. They arrived pretty early. Inside the field, the only ones present were those from the Spiritual Temple and Priest Temple. The other temples had yet to arrive. The spiritual temple and priest temple's team leaders were Chen Hongyu and Elder Ling. Long Haochen nodded to the two before greeting them. Elder Ling returned a smile, and Chen Hongyu gave off a snort. He was visibly still unhappy about losing to Long Haochen. Chen Hongyu remarked unhappily, "Grandpa, what are you snorting for? Don't tell me you cannot bear a loss at this age." Chen Hongyu glared at her, truly a girl of age. "You girl, not making a contribution for our spiritual temple is one thing, but now you're helping outsiders in beating your grandpa." Chen Yinga gave off a smile, before running off to Chen Hongyu's side and coquettishly grabbing his hand, as well as pulling his beard a bit occasionally. Due to this, Chen Hongyu did not know whether to laugh or to cry, his face easing up, as he spoke a few sentences in Chen Yinga's ears. Chen Yinga remarked proudly, "I knew it, you have a sharp mouth but a soft heart. You clearly have good intentions, but won't express them properly. I knew that Grandpa treats me the best." Chen Hongyu severely said, "This is not being good to you, but thinking about our spiritual temple's future. You girl, are the same as before. You're already grown up, so remember your duties." "Yes." Chen Yinga stood straight and made her salutations. But when she turned off to run back to Long Haochen's side, her laughing playful face betrayed her true thoughts. Anyway, from her childhood to now she had never really feared Chen Hongyu. Chen Hongyu shook his head with a helpless feeling. No matter what, the decision that was already made could not be changed anymore. From the looks of it, this dear granddaughter of mine won't ever gain the lead of bright glimmer of hope. A short time later, the competitors from the other temples were there as well. The participating individuals were slightly different from yesterday, but the difference was not big, and the terrain did not change much either. That long crystal pillar from yesterday was not there anymore, replaced by a huge crystal ball. This crystal ball was 5 meters long in diameter. Placed in the middle of the field, it appeared colossal. On its pedestal seemed to be sculptures made of precious stones. The crystal ball itself was light blue, and emitted faint waves of spiritual energy from within. Long Haochen was informed ahead of time by his grandfather that this crystal ball was called Saint Bead, a divine tool beyond divine tools. Made from a special crystal, it could bear a massive input of spiritual energy. After getting remodeled with magic formations, its insides became extremely stable, revealing its ability of elemental assimilation. Simply said, this Saint Bead was a divine tool incarnating elemental obliterating halo. It had an ability similar to elemental obliterating halo released on its surface, and even the demon god emperor wouldn't manage to breach through it. But its enormous tolerance to spiritual energy caused a rather weak physical resistance. The Saint Bead had practical uses. With sufficient control, one could use it in battle for its power of swallowing forbidden spells. The heads of the alliance were the ones in control of it throughout history, but, due to the internal strife between the 6 great temples, although the Saint Bead had an important efficacy, because of its emblematic value, it was not permitted to bring it out in the Holy War. It could only serve as a final means of defense for Holy City. Long Haochen's mental force being overwhelming, when standing beside the Saint Bead, he silently sensed the changes in it. Very rapidly, his face now had a look of shock. That's because he could not sense any emanation of spiritual energy from the bead. But when his senses made way, it would get swallowed by this Saint Bead. In other words, it could swallow not only spiritual energy, but even mental force as well. When Long Haochen's rich and powerful mental force made way inside, with the feeling of entering a vast sea. When used appropriately, this Saint Bead was bound to be exceptionally effective against unexpected enemies. For instance, when Long Haochen was caught by the demon god of deep vision's deep vision godly pool, this Saint Bead could have cancelled it, and even inflicted serious damage to the demon god of deep vision. While Long Haochen was in the midst of pondering over the Saint Bead, the chief referee Chen Zidian made his way. Glancing at the 21 people around the Saint Bead, he nodded, "You all ready?" Long Haochen came back to his senses, and replied alongside the others, "Ready." Chen Zidian declared, "Then start." His right hand giving a pat to the Saint Bead, a soft light essence was poured within, instantly turning it into a light gold color, slowly arising from its base. Long Haochen then realized that pedestal was actually not for amplifying the Saint Bead, but for limiting it. When the Saint Bead ascended, a terrifying engulfing force rose from within it. Long Haochen finally understood right now why the Saint Bead was used in the domain battle. That's because if one was to not utilize a domain, the spiritual energy in one's body would get swallowed by this Saint Bead. This was the first time he encountered such a situation. From the looks of it, the Saint Bead was really even more terrifying than any other divine tool he had ever encountered before. Tyrannical waves of spiritual energy circulated through the air as Long Houchen strode forward, forming a triangle with Kia, Chen Yinga, and himself. In the meantime, a drizzling brilliance came out from his body, shrouding the three of them. Both hands reaching out in front of him, the light god domain's golden light was immediately poured inside the saint bead. A mysterious phenomenon arose then. When his domain came into contact with the saint bead, the swallowing force on it immediately weakened significantly. The saint bead was then turned into a golden color. The powerhouses from the 6 great temples all poured their own domains into the saint bead, and immediately, under the powerful domain's urges, it released brilliant color, illuminated brightly. However, Long Houchen very rapidly had a feeling of pressure. This pressure stemmed from the saint bead, which released a powerful absorption force. The only benefit was that while his domain power was poured into the saint bead, Long Houchen's mental force traveled through it besides. This way, he had a way out. In other words, should he be unable to bear this swallowing force any longer, he could at any time control his own domain to break away from the saint bead. But, doing so would mean his elimination from the domain battle. Long Qianying had told once him that in case his domain should break away, he would suffer the impact force of the other domains within the saint bead, and directly leave the area of the saint bead, stopped from coming back. The pressure the saint bead inflicted on Long Houchen was not so remarkable. His light god domain reached an extremely high level and had a very potent automatic control. So although the saint bead's pressure was present, it only caused a consumption of his spiritual energy and no more. An even greater pressure was going towards the other powerhouses of the 6 great temples. Inside the saint bead was a great expanse of chaotic space. After the domains entered inside, they could only be controlled to evacuate or stay, and couldn't attack or defend while inside. So, 21 domains were in the midst of struggling with each other inside the bead. At this time, coordination was visibly very important. The 3 domains from each side had to enter together with no distinction, and when making their way inside, remain connected. While inside, this connection would remain for the entire duration. Kia and Chen Yinga were powering their own domains. Kia's domain of purification was almost instantly mixed with Long Houchen's light god domain, and Chen Yinga's beast god domain surrounded theirs. The spiritual saint robe's great power manifested with no doubts. Right now, the domain resulting from the unity of the 3 inside the saint bead looked like a monster, filled inside with holy and purifying power, and myriad beasts surrounding them outside. No matter which other temple's domain would attack, it would immediately be repelled and sustain quite a powerful shock. Don't forget that right now, Long Houchen's group had full access to their equipment. Kia used naturally the sickle of the god of death, and her domain of purification's destructive power gained a several folds power boost. Chen Yinga's saint spiritual robe supplied her with a close to limitless spiritual energy. In battle endurance, even Long Houchen and his heart of eternity would not be a match against her. As for Long Houchen, he was fully equipped with the golden foundation armor on him, and the divine unicorn behind. If not for consideration of his excessively tyrannical power, for fear that it would affect the fusion of their 3 domains, he would even have called out Hao Yue. The greatest boost Long Houchen had did not come from the divine unicorn or golden foundation armor, but from the divine snail shield of sun and moon in his right hand. A soft multicolored radiance was exuded from the divine snail shield of sun and moon, boosting all the aspects of his light god domain. The holy spiritual energy of the divine snail shield was just as pure as Long Houchen's, and furthermore it had an extreme defensive power. Under its boosting effects, Long Houchen's group of 3's domain fusion became incomparably stable. 3 divine tools for 3 individuals was an extremely rare display, even for the 6 great temples. The most important in the domain battle was not one's attack but one's defense. The holy bead being a space of chaos, no one could control attacks. All they could do would be to strengthen their defenses to the greatest extent, to possibly last for the longest time possible inside the saint bead, thus obtaining an even better ranking. With equipment authorized, the 6 great temples' trump cards came to view. The Night Temple's participation in this battle was impressively led by Long Qianying, with Yan Haoyu at his side, as well as the Supreme Shield Knight. Long Qianying's divine throne was a divine tool obviously. Yan Haoyu had his Starry Sky mythological beast's assistance, which reached the divine tool grade as well. The Supreme Shield Knight also had a huge shield in his hand, 3 meters long and 2 meters wide, a terrible pagoda shield emitting a dark golden gloss. A multicolored halation flickered in the midst of that dark gold. A divine tool-ranked shield. This was the first time Long Houchen saw another divine tool-ranked shield than his own divine snail shield. Now, the three knights all had a divine tool of their own in this domain battle, and furthermore, the divine throne being such a famous object in the Temple Alliance was not only a divine tool, but moreover a special set. Right now, the most domineering domain in the Saint Bede was these three knights. The spiritual energy they totaled was over 1 million, they had 3 divine tools, and the strongest Yang Haoyu in their ranks. The addition of these elements put the three knights to an invincible position. Compared to the union of their domains, the other side's domains were clearly no match. Only second to the Knight Temple was the Mage Temple. 3 mags waving a staff in each of their hands, with Li Xingji's green staff releasing a multicolored gloss as well, the sign of a divine tool. Meanwhile, the same applied to his green magic robe, which was to say that he had at least 2 divine tools on his person alone. But his 2 helpers had no divine tool, both were clad in sets of epic tier equipment, which still provided a pretty good boost. The 3 mags and knights had their different strength. After their domains entered the Saint Bede, they did not hold any advantage, but kept chanting from beginning to end. Thanks to Long Haochen's mental force's considerable level while controlling his side's domain, he also probed on the changes of the other united domains, finding out that as the 3 mags kept chanting, the Mage Temple's side's domain was swiftly integrating, becoming more and more integral, and showing traces of rising to a higher level. What a great Mage Temple! They were making use of magic's features to make their 3 domains into a domain of a kind of chaotic magic. No wonder Li Xingji was so fearless, they really had made their preparations ahead of time. The other temples all had their own features, but were somewhat lacking compared to the Mage Temple and the Knight Temple. The most miserable was the Warrior Temple. From the looks of it, the Warrior Temple still had a good foundation. Under Qiu Yonghao's lead, these 3 participating warriors had not even a single piece of epic tier equipment, all were clad in legendary tier equipment. This was clearly pitiable, as, in fact, they were representatives of the Warrior Temple's strength. So the Warrior Temple's side was clearly the weakest out of the 7 domain unions. But because of the sharpness of Qiu Yonghao's sword intent domain, they could still persist for some time. Long Haochen was not the least bit worried, having a calm smile on his face, exercising control over the relinquished territory of their side's domain. Because Chen Yinger's beast god domain was the outermost, her spiritual energy consumption was much higher than Long Haochen and Kia, but thanks to the overwhelming spiritual saint robe, this was no issue for the time being. In the meantime, having Chen Yinger's protection made Long Haochen and Kia's spiritual energy consumption the lowest possible. Chen Hongyu and his 2 comrades felt tinges of helplessness as they deployed their own domains, occasionally looking at Chen Yinger in great pain. If this girl clad in the spiritual saint robe was on their side, Chen Hongyu would have felt absolutely confident in being able to contend against the Knight Temple and Mage Temple. His mythological beast's domain could easily meld with the other 2 great summoners' domain in one. If Chen Yinger's beast god domain and saint spiritual robe were added to the lot, he could even utilize the mythologic beast array inside the Saint Bede, matching the Knight Temple and Mage Temple's sides. As time passed, the diverse temples' trumps were released, and an hour had already gone by in the blink of an eye. They were all struggling in their own ways, but on the surface, no side was close to being unable to endure anymore. Chen Zidian stood calmly, observing the domains contest. This Saint Bede was truly miraculous, even someone so strong as him would not dare attempt to pour his own domain inside, especially with the 21 domains currently within. However, his powerful mental force enabled him to probe at the conflict between the 7 parties within. Another hour passed, and noon was drawing closer. This time, some changes in the situation were visible. The most inferior party would always be the most conspicuous, and this time was no exception. Right now, the 3 powerhouses from the Warrior Temple were all dripping with sweat. Their domain unions inside the Saint Bede were shaking violently at each collision. Clearly they would not be able to keep up for much longer. No one dared force things in this domain battle. The reason was simple: if some accident occurs, the domain will shatter within the Saint Bede, resulting in great damage to one's strength. This video will end here.